Welcome to They Come with Instructions, the podcast, where we discuss biblical principles for real life matters. I am your host, Renee Anderson. I am a mother, I am a mentor, and I am a friend. I'm also the author of a book entitled the same name, They Come with Instructions, Biblical Principles for Raising Children. Today, I am so excited because I have a guest who was my former boss, who has become one of my very best friends, and even serves as a role as my mentor. You hired me to the city of Los Angeles over 20 years ago, which started my public sector career, and it has soared into places that I only dreamed of. And I owe so much of that credit to you. Thank you, Paula Adams,
Thank
for
you.
joining us today. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. What an introduction.
Yes, so true. You're a part of my story. You're a part of my journey. Um, we have had so many conversations where I was teary eyed and you listened and encouraged me so many times in our similar stories and roles of being a single parent,
Yes, yes.
being a single mom. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I've shared on my podcast before how um, I didn't have many influencers who were successful women as single parents, right? My influencers were prayer warriors, kind of women in the church, but none who really had aspired or accomplished their educations and professional careers until I met you. And even though I outnumbered you with the number of kids that I had, like seeing you at the level of professional attainment really inspired me. So kind of introduce yourself. Tell us kind of as much as you're comfortable with sharing about your journey to single motherhood, and then we'll go from there.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, California, in the south part of LA. I am the second of five children to Mr. and Mrs. Taylor. So, born and raised in Los Angeles. My parents were my role models, but I too did not have a female that I looked to for accomplishment in the workforce,
Mhm.
but I had several men that had, quote unquote, made it,
Mhm.
if you will, my own father, his friends.
Mhm.
And so they would come to the house and visit. When I was growing up, a lot of social activities happen within the home.
Mhm.
So you could not participate, but you could sit back and listen
Mhm.
to the conversations, watch the men play chess, hear about their careers and that sort of thing. So after graduating from UC Santa Barbara in 1986, I began dating a particular fellow that I fell madly in love with. But he wasn't really my parents' favorite, but he was mine. And we got married. I felt happy, and we never had children. And unfortunately, in November, after a couple of years of marriage, right before Thanksgiving, he died in an automobile accident.
Mm.
And that was like a pivotal moment for me.
Mhm.
Um, just rebounding from that.
Mhm.
I happened to have been living in Hawthorne, California at that time, and a friend of mine lived in the neighboring Lawndale.
Mhm.
And I was working for the Department of Water and Power when this happened. And she was trying to get me to rejoin life again, if you will, because I had slipped into a little bit of a depression,
Mhm.
and invited me over to her home for a football game. And I went just to get out of the house, and that's where I met my children's father.
Mm-hmm.
He was a friend of my friend's husband.
Mm-hmm.
My children's father was athletic, funny, fun. I enjoyed spending time with him. So we entered into a very fun relationship. It moved very quickly, and he is the father of my two children. And the fun ended when we became parents
Mm.
because we never discussed parenting.
Mm.
And when you have a child, of course, you recognize, oh, this is not how I intend to do this. And that's when certain, arguments, if you will, or disagreements started to come into the home. And we didn't go to premarital counseling or anything like that. And the fun just dwindled away.
Wow.
So now I have two daughters who are now 26 and 24. When they were toddlers, their father and I divorced.
Mm.
And then I became a single parent. At that time, I had gone to my father for advice before the divorce, and I didn't agree with the advice he gave me, which was, I'm summarizing, Paula, just suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
And sucking it up wasn't anything I was going to do, so we divorced. The girls were toddlers, and luckily at that point in time, I had coworkers in my office, two, who I felt comfortable talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And I promise you, I sounded like a broken record for a good year and a half about the separation, the divorce, being, not really knowing how am I going to parent these two young girls by myself. And one particular coworker, I went into her office every day at lunchtime. And I promise you, I said the same thing. And she sat there and listened like she was hearing it for the first time.
Wow.
Every single day. And then one day I noticed I wasn't talking about it anymore. And then that's when I sort of knew internally that I was maybe not healed, but healed enough to begin to take, further steps in both my career and the raising of my children. Now, I was very, very fortunate that I had parents who, at the time that my children were born, were already both retired.
Mm-hmm.
They were willing to support me in growing my career by being the second set of parents, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the kids to school, picking them up, cooking dinner, like whatever I needed.
Mm-hmm.
They were retired, and my oldest daughter was their first grandchild. So, the first is like the biggest
Yes.
deal, right?
Absolutely.
And so they were both willing to give me the support that I needed. My oldest daughter was my sibling's first niece. So there was a lot of excitement around, what do you need? What can I do? Where can I support you? So I had that village to help me with the kids, take some of that pressure off because I didn't know what I was doing. And when I needed to work late or study for the next promotional exam or have a day to myself to go to the movies, there were always a group of 6 people that I could choose from. 2 were my parents and 4 were my siblings. And they loved it. It was like, oh, I get to watch my nieces. And my mother-in-law as well. She lived a distance away, but she too, my ex-husband's mother was always, in my camp and there for support for me. So that's really was the foundation for me that allowed me to continue to move on with life, grow a career, and then, when you're the grandmother and you've already raised your family, you kind of know where to, offer that additional support. And so I leaned on both grandmothers for that.
Mhm. You have shared a lot, so I kind of want to go back a little bit because the experience of losing a loved one, a husband, at a young age is a big deal. You spoke about slipping into depression a little bit, and even then to go through the divorce while your children were so young really kind of speaks more about your resilience,
Yes.
right? And I want to highlight that because so many people get stuck when tragic things happen. And unfortunately, tragic things, horrible things happen to good people. What do you believe is that character, that quality within you that allows you or allowed you to rebound? Because somebody out there is dealing with a loss,
Yes.
death, divorce.
Yeah.
Both of them are significant losses. Both of them require a grieving process. What character, what strength would you offer someone to kind of tap into or develop to kind of get through that?
So, in order to answer that question, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about my mother,
Mhm.
who was in a more traditional marriage where my father was in charge of all important decisions,
Mhm.
the breadwinner, and she had to follow his lead. And that's okay, but she didn't have a voice. So there wasn't discussion and then a decision. There were just decisions that she had to just pivot to. And I saw many examples within my youth and young adulthood where my mother didn't necessarily agree with the decision, but she had to follow it. So this may sound negative, but it's not. I didn't want to be like my mother. I wanted to be in control of my life and decisions in my household. And I wanted to be able to say, I don't feel good today, or I need a break without just pushing along and putting on a smile and demonstrating like perfectionism when it was it wasn't necessarily false, but she buried a lot of who she was for the sake of her husband and her family. So when Terrence died and I was depressed, I said to my supervisor at Water and Power, I'm depressed. I need help. I think it was because of my upbringing. I wasn't willing to bury what I was feeling. I didn't necessarily know where to go and get the help, but I wanted to let someone know what I was feeling. And I remember I had a male supervisor at that time. He didn't really know what to do. He's looking at me. He ran to his desk area, grabbed some Kleenex, and brought it. I'm like, oh, I'm dumping on this poor man. But he did give me, EAP. He gave me like a little guidebook in order to take like a step towards healing. Had I gone to my parents, I believe at that time, and said, I'm depressed, I don't think I would have gotten that same guidance because their process was to bury or act like things weren't really happening when they really were, or you were really feeling something.
Mm-hmm.
So through that EAP process,
EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program for anyone who may not know.
right, the
Mm-hmm.
Employee Assistance Program through my employer at that time,
Mm-hmm.
I was connected with a women's group in the Westwood area, and I was allowed time to go to these meetings and talk about feelings. And it eventually led me back to my primary care doctor
Mm-hmm.
um, to talk more.
Mm-hmm.
I was on medication,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the medication helped get through the hardest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was weaned off, and slowly you get back into some normalcy of life.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very helpful
Mm-hmm.
for me that my supervisor knew
Mm-hmm.
what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was having a challenging day, he knew how to handle what he saw.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not feel like I had to hide and be absent from work. Like I could still go to work
Mm-hmm.
and just be myself, and I was going through something.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer the question about resilience, I don't think that I'm necessarily just was a resilient person.
Mm-hmm.
It was more that I didn't want to bury feelings because that was the way I was raised, just to go along and act like everything was okay when it really wasn't. That first experience gave me confidence. So when something happened the next time,
Mm-hmm.
I had a little bit of a roadmap
Mm-hmm.
that I could follow for the next set of challenges
Yeah.
that came along the way.
That's so good, Paula. There's so much there, right? What I heard is that you had a difficult situation and you made a conscious decision on how you were not going to deal with it.
Right.
And that needs to resound. Like, I really hope someone grasps hold to that, because how you choose to deal with your circumstances, it's really about a choice.
Yeah.
Like life happens, things that are outside of your control, things that could overwhelm you, things that could possibly break you.
Right.
And many women might have had breakdowns or, really not recovered as well. But in all things, you make a choice. We get a choice.
Right.
There's a scripture, because of course this is biblical principles for how real life matters.
Right.
And I believe it's First Corinthians, the chapter, and it talks about how God will never put more on us than we're able to bear. And that he always makes a way of escape for us, but sometimes we don't take the escape.
Right.
And so it comes to that, like choosing a route. And even in the fact that you didn't know what you were going to do, you made a choice of what you weren't going to do. And that's valuable too, because so many people think because you're raised in a two-parent home, you're
Right.
not struggling financially. You have the house, the picket fence, the dog, and the appearances of all things being happy and healthy. That's not always true, because people don't know what goes on behind those closed doors. Now, you were raised in a healthy environment. I know Mr. and Mrs. Taylor. I've met them both. Kudos to the Taylors. Um, but even with that, sometimes people think, oh, well, you weren't raised well. I had somebody tell me after they saw the interview with my mother, oh, if I was raised in a house like yours, I would have been so much farther along. And that's not a guarantee either. Like life is about choices. It's about the
Right.
choice you make.
You know, everything you say is so accurate. And my mother, if you were to speak to her today and, s- you know, go back in time, she will say where she has regrets about certain things. But again, she was raised at a different time, probably followed the modeling of her parents. And, that was just the way that it was. But yes, I did make a conscious choice. But sometimes in making those choices, I did feel alienated from my own parents
Mm,
because, the advice was suck it up,
mm,
and the appearance does look like you're in this house, your parents are there, your father's a professional, everything is perfect. Perfection does not exist in anyone's household. I mean, even in the news today, I'm not going to digress, but we have our former First Lady talking about how her household is changing. She has felt however she felt about her husband for a while. She's just being more open publicly about it. And I am glad she's doing that because they are a powerful couple and they're sticking through their marriage. But it's not perfect because perfection does not exist in any household. I
mm,
don't care what the outside looks like.
mhm. That's
It
good.
is, it's just not perfect.
Perfection does not exist. Um, your parents kind of told you to suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
My family, my church, was kind of like, yeah, once you're in a marriage, you just stay in it, divorce is not an option. God frowns on it, and it wasn't his intention for marriage. Um, and then you made reference to feeling alienated when you make that choice to go against
Yeah.
the advice or the counsel that you were presented with. Any regrets in going against the advice?
No, but there were some periods of loneliness. You know, I stopped going to a neighborhood community church at that time
Mm,
because of how I was feeling or how I perceived people felt about,
mm-hmm.
my situation. One of my father's cousins had branched off and started pastoring his own church. And he gave me counsel for a really long time. And that was really, really helpful. He just happened to be a bit more open minded about, the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so for years, I will tell you privately, I felt somewhat ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
But today, I feel none of that. And I have no regrets
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever. I
Mm-hmm.
never really regretted the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt shamed on how I thought you thought about me,
Mm.
you know?
That's so good. Cause I experienced that too. I experienced it coming up in the church as a church girl,
Mm-hmm.
and then found myself as an unwed mother. And one of the reasons that I stayed in my marriage as long as I did was for that very reason, was because I didn't want to be a statistic.
Right.
I didn't want to be the woman with all these kids and no father. Like that shame, that it's a burden, it's a weight,
Mm-hmm.
and it really will cause you to make some horrible choices. It really will.
Yeah. But what I wasn't getting in terms of feeling like it was okay to be a single parent in whatever spaces I was in where I didn't necessarily know for certain what people thought, but what I thought they thought, I took it on as a real thing, right?
Mhm.
But what I didn't get in those spaces about being a single parent, I got it in the workplace because I was the boss. People looking up to me and they or that gave me what I needed in the workforce where I didn't get in other spaces.
Mm.
And it gave me more determination, if you will,
Mhm.
to like make it to the top
Mm.
fast.
So you're getting ahead of us because that's definitely where I wanna get to and just kinda talk about the weight and the role of that responsibility. But before we get there, I want to hear from you because 'cause you're so good at advice. I would go in your office and I honestly, I think I've said this to you before, where I would feel like a little bird with my little mouth open because you were always gonna drop a gem. You would always drop a nugget. So, for our single parents, moms or dads, people, grandparents, right, godparents who may have assumed the a role because you don't plan on being a single parent, not most times. We know people are and society has kind of a different approach about um, bringing children into the world today. But traditional values and biblical principles, right, are not that you do it alone, that
Right,
there's a mother and a father. So
right.
when you go against the traditional values, you go against the biblical principles for whatever that reason is, whether it's your choice or circumstances that are you're confronting. What advice do you offer for that single parent? Like, is there one good piece of advice that really, stands out to you that maybe helped you hold it together? What do you have to offer?
Therapy. Because remember, I first got into a group therapy situation before I was a parent. It was as a result of a different event, and it was before I was a parent. But I had embraced group therapy sessions prior to the next event where I needed support. So I have been in some form of therapy almost my entire adult life, whether it be through a medical provider or through a professional coach in a professional setting or certain groups that I've been a member of where I felt that I trusted the people in the group and I could speak to them. All of those spaces where I could speak my truth have been therapeutic.
Mhm.
And being in that environment predated me being a parent.
Mhm.
So then when I was going through the divorce, I just went back to, oh, well, this group therapy worked for the last traumatic event. It wasn't the same group therapy, but I ran back
Mhm.
to therapy,
Mhm.
where then I was in a group of divorced women. And I happened to have picked a community where there weren't a lot of African Americans, but I picked that community because it was close to where I was working at that time. And that was so enlightening for me. It was tough going through the divorce. It was tough, doing being a single parent. But in my group therapy, I saw all these other types of women who were going through the same thing as me, who lived in Bel Air, up on Mulholland Drive. And, going back to what you think it is, rich people weren't going through this. Or I just didn't have it in my mind that that was happening. But when I saw it up close and personal, that was even helpful
Mm.
to see, Paula, you're not the only one.
Mhm.
And I had a career. Some of these women were housewives and then just got left. And they were suffering in a different way. But of course, these are my own stereotypes. If you lived in the Palisades, like life was perfect or whatever the community was. But so when I was going through the divorce and I was in therapy again and I was with women who I would not have thought on my own would be in this same sort of situation, I found that to be very helpful. And we shared and we had so many similar experiences
Mhm. Mhm.
just as women and, the struggle of it all. But in certain situations, it seemed like I was doing better because what did I have? I had this big old career. So I wasn't, not that there's anything wrong with being an at home mom, but having a career really helped my confidence, my ego, and it fueled other parts of my life.
Mhm.
So I went through that therapy for, in a group setting
Mhm.
until I didn't need it anymore.
Right.
And remember, I told you there was a coworker whose office I went into every day at lunchtime. That was therapeutic. Bless her heart. She just sat there and listened, like, here she comes again. But never had an expression on her face in terms of rolling her eyes or
Mhm.
anything like that.
Mhm.
Interestingly, today, that person herself is divorced.
Mm.
But going back to those early years, I thought she was living a perfect life.
Mhm.
You know, it's just another one of those situations where you get an example
Mhm.
of it looks perfect because you're not behind closed doors living it.
Yeah.
So,
That's good. That's definitely one of the lies of the enemy is to make you feel like you're the only one going through or dealing with what you're going through. And that's not true. There's always something that's people can relate to, and there's nothing new under the sun.
right, there's nothing new under the sun. And having gone through group therapy a few times, I learned more about being my authentic self
That's good.
and opening up to others to show them my life wasn't perfect because I never wanted any woman, men too, but more women who were similarly situated to me to think that, oh, my life is perfect because it never was. Of course, in my professional capacity, I'm going to be professional and demonstrate professionalism. But if you came to speak to me, I would share my flaws too. I would share how many times I fell down and had to get back up
Mhm.
and or made a mistake to just let people know we're all people.
Mhm.
We're just all people.
Humans, yeah.
We're all human,
Yeah.
right?
I advocate for therapy too. I have been to therapy several times, and I believe it was you probably who encouraged that for me, because it wasn't something that I just authentically would have tried, but I did find value in it. And one of the things that I find value in is that just kind of like you alluded to, that your parents had one way of like presenting how you deal with it. You knew you didn't want to deal with it that way, but therapy then offers you alternative ways.
Right.
And sometimes, in and of ourselves as individuals, we don't, we can't sometimes identify alternative ways of looking at things, confronting things, getting through things. So, therapy definitely provides that, whether it's group or individual, it helps to hear a different person's perspective and then make your own choices. But at least you're supported in the idea or the notion that you're not wrong or there's nothing wrong with you or you're not broken because you don't want to do it this way. And there are still healthy alternatives to deal with life. in whatever life presents. So definitely advocating for therapy. Now, I have learned that there are kind of two major stages of being a parent.
Mm-hmm.
The initial stage of mothering or fathering, mothering where you're nurturing, you're protecting, you're rearing, raising, you're the one making the decisions. And then as they get older, we transition to parenting, where there's less of your decisions, but you're more in a supportive role, encouraging role. You remind them of lessons and principles. So, how do you feel now that you're no longer in the mothering role, but have transferred now into more of kind of the parenting stage?
I love it. I love it. I love to just sit back and listen to their decisions and offer advice in a way where it doesn't feel like advice.
Mm-hmm.
For
Mm-hmm.
example, well, have you ever thought about this?
Mm-hmm.
Or have you ever thought about that? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just throwing it out there
Right.
that there are different ways to think about, whatever your situation is. And, you know, this may not be all young people, but certainly with my daughters, they use the term grown in a way where it's like, I don't even know what you think you are. But okay, we're just gonna roll with that.
Like, who are they trying to convince? You or
Right?
themselves
Themselves,
that they're grown?
that they're grown.
I love it. So I'm a mother of sons. I have never mothered or parented daughters. And the same for you. You only have the two girls. So I can tell you a gazillion things about mother of sons and things that you can kind of look for or deal with in raising sons. What would you offer like for mothers of daughters? Like what are some of the challenges, things that, are commonalities? Like I'm a girl, I was a daughter, I am a daughter, so I can inherently probably talk to the topic, but how do you, as the mother of daughters, what are some things that, were difficult during their rearing?
One of the most difficult things was not having their father there or a male um, role model outside of their grandfather or my brother, their only uncle, who was present in the home, all the time to give them certain examples because I can't give the example of how a man should treat a woman. I can tell you, when I was raising them, I made a conscious decision for many years where I did not date. I didn't date on purpose because I never wanted to put a man in front of my children. I never wanted them to feel as though they didn't have my undivided attention for until really my oldest got to high school. That's when I started dating again after many years of not. And then I was very, very careful about who came over my house, in what capacity. So they didn't see that in our home because that's not something that was in my house. But as a young woman, I was an exchange student where I lived abroad for a year in Brazil prior to graduating from college. And so, having had that experience and having seen at a very early age that this planet is so large and there's so much opportunity out there if you can get out of your 5-mile radius and see what the world has to offer. So, exploring, showing different ways of living was something that I brought into parenting because it came with me from my upbringing,
Mhm.
from something I was interested in doing. So when my children were of a certain age, probably like 7, 9, Every other year, I planned a large vacation, if you will, to different parts of the world. They had passports early, so they've been to the British Isles, to Europe, South America, Costa Rica, more times than me. Scandinavia, all before they graduated from high school, because that was a conscious decision on my part to plan for vacation, to let them know there there's so much around the globe that may be of interest to you that you don't necessarily have to follow the example of what you're seeing in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted them just to see a lot of different examples of what could be.
Mm-hmm.
The most challenging for me was not the elementary school age. It's when you become the teenager and you're going through puberty.
Mm-hmm.
Am I pronouncing that right?
Puberty. Mm-hmm.
And you're wanting to impress these boys, and then like this whole different person shows up. And then explaining, come on now. This is really not the presentation you want to make. And I understood what was happening. I did not like those years at all because, you know, maintaining your own dignity and respect and still being noticed by, boys or going on dates, of course it's important. But not wanting, young women to make bad decisions or decisions that I would not want for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that period of time
Mm-hmm.
I found to be really, really challenging. And my oldest daughter had a couple of high school classmates that made a wrong turn.
Mm-hmm.
And those were very close friends of hers. And there were a couple of years there that I was kind of like on pins and needles, talking to her, giving her good advice.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're at work, you don't
Mm-hmm.
know what people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
You trust and hope your children are doing what you've taught them, and you know that you've laid a good foundation. But again, we're all human beings,
Yeah.
and peer pressure is
Mm-hmm.
tough.
It is. It is.
Mhm.
One of the things that I found during that age and that stage of adolescence is consistency. Like, that's not the time to try to become their friend so that they'll like you. That's not the time to try to lower your standards or expand the parameters that you've already established. That's not the time. Like, you need to remain consistent. They're not going to like you. They may hate you, right? Like, been there, done that. But at the end, like, that consistency and you remaining the parent turns out for their good in the end. And that's for daughters and or sons, because you do want them to learn, you do want them to blossom, you do want them to have their own experiences. But to the point that you're making, that will come with time. But during that transition time of adolescence, remain consistent.
1000%. I know with every fiber in my being that there were a few years in that teenage period where my children did not like me. I know that for a fact. And I had to just not care
Mm-hmm.
because I knew there was a goal in mind that I had that I wanted them to reach. Now that they're 24 and 26, and then they look back and they are satisfied with where their lives are right now,
Mm-hmm.
they will tell me, "Oh, mom, I'm so appreciative of X, Y, and Z." So they're having points of recognition for themselves
Yes.
because, you know, that high school group, whether
Mm-hmm.
you remain close to them or not,
Mm-hmm.
and especially with social media, you know where certain people have landed
Mm-hmm.
and you see where your life is
Mm-hmm.
and you recognize, oh, that tough love served a purpose,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. And it 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 serves a purpose that benefits them, right? Because we're already the adults
Right.
and they feel like we're so mean, we're so misunderstanding, we're so inconsiderate to what our standards are and remaining consistent in that, but really it's for their good and they don't understand it then. But just what you're pointing out, they will come to recognize it later and appreciate you for it.
And appreciate you for it. Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Audience, I hate to interrupt, but we have to pause because we're running out of time. But listen, come back next episode for part 2, where I finish the conversation with Miss Paula Adams. I know you're enjoying this. She's not only giving us the parenting, but also giving us tips for the professional. I know you're enjoying the conversation, so come back and see part 2. You know how to reach me at TCWI at ReneeAndersonWritings.com. Connect with me, share the video, like and subscribe, do all those things, but most importantly, come back to hear the conclusion of the conversation with Paula Adams. Until next time, love and blessings.